On this episode of Colorism Conversations, we talk about the implications of the phrase, I don't see color. And what I do, and she said, well, I don't see color. And, so it brings us to the idea of what does that really mean when people say, I don't see color? What does that mean for the person that you are talking to? Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Colorism Conversations. It is the repetition of affirmations that leads to belief. Once that belief becomes a deep conviction, things begin to happen. Muhammad Ali. I am in charge of my life. I am improving my life by eliminating the drama within it. I let go of everything and everyone that impedes my progress in life. I do not entertain negative thoughts, feelings, or conversations. I choose to be happy today. I am continually aligned with my higher purpose. I am strong. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. We are here with Renee Moore, Public Health Advisor for I Am the Color of Beautiful Global. Welcome, beautiful.
Thank you.
So glad to have you here. So today on Colorism Conversations, we are talking about the phrase, I don't see color. And this came up in a Zoom meeting that I was in where there was a woman who was Caucasian, and I got to talking about colorism and what I do, and she said, well, I don't see color. And so it brings us to the idea of what does that really mean when people say, I don't see color? What does that mean for the person that you are talking to? So I want to start out by reading this particular, and it's very interesting because this was written by a Caucasian writer, David Shelton, from the Leaf Chronicle. And he says, when you strip their skin color from a person, you have essentially omitted from that person a major part of their identity, their family, culture, and their heritage. By, quote, not seeing color, end quote, you aren't seeing the person, let alone the person as a whole. And as such, that individually essentially becomes nothing in your subconscious mind. I thought that was so powerful for someone who is white to say what that means when someone who is white or from a different per se culture that's not a culture of color, for them to say, I don't see color. It was really profound to me that he had that epiphany about what that means.
Right.
Go ahead.
So, and that's the thing. We have to really understand what that means when you say that. And I understand that the intention is to say, I'm not discriminatory, I'm not racist. But, communication is so important. And the thing about communication is that it's only good communication if the message that is sent is the intended message is the message that's received.
Right.
And the other thing about it is, are you saying this just to make you feel better? to make, so that we don't have to talk about race, which
Right.
is a very sensitive, touchy subject. Are you saying
Exactly.
that so that you can say, I can be prejudiced without consequences?
Right.
So you
Right.
really have to understand the complete and total implications of what it means when you say, I don't see color.
Right. And that is what we're really going to be talking about today is what that means when you say I don't see color. And even when you say it as a person of color, when you say I don't see color, because many times when we start talking about colorism and what happens with colorism and what colorism talks about, many times we'll have Black people or people of color who will say, I don't see color, in a way to minimize colorism and to minimize the effects of how people who are deeply melanated are treated differently than people who are not as deeply melanated. And so to say, I don't see color, it's the same thing when you're saying it within the same group of people, the same race of people. It still is the same, it still has the same connotation.
Oh, absolutely. And it's still microaggressive in many ways. Um,
Right,
so, you really want to acknowledge, because the way that I walk through the world in my skin tone is not necessarily the same way that you walk through the world with your
right,
skin tone. And I
right.
have to acknowledge that. And I have to acknowledge all of the trauma and the joys that come with everything that you've experienced and what makes you who you are.
Exactly, exactly. And so we're going to touch on four different aspects of I don't see color. So the first one we're going to talk about is pretty much, it's kind of in the same vein of what we've just been saying, and that is that you don't see me. So when people say I don't see color, it's like they're saying that I choose to ignore everything about you, everything that ties into, because my color has so much to do with who I am. And like you said, how I have to navigate through the world. So to say you don't see color is to say you don't see me.
Right. And all the history that makes me who I am. History is so much a part of our lives. Um, and so when you don't see color, you don't recognize the history that I've gone through in this country.
Exactly.
And you choose to ignore the systemic racism, the individual racism, the historical part of the cultural part of me
Right.
that makes me who I am. And there's so much to learn from people about their culture.
Yes.
When you choose to ignore their skin tone, you're ignoring their culture.
Exactly. And one of the things that is so important for us to understand too is that God, who is the master creator, he paints in color. I don't know a whole lot of artists that just paint in white or just paint in black or paint in gray.
Right?
There's so much color involved in our world, and God, the master creator, is a God of color. And so in his creation, in his creating, he created people from different regions with different color and with different experiences. And, we have to understand that God is a God of color. He created color. He does not distinguish or treat us any different, which is what we're supposed to be doing, not treating each other different based on some melanin, which is what I always say. And it's not to minimize it, but what it really comes down to is melanin. And
Right.
the idea of discriminating because I have more pigmentation, more melanin in my skin. And that's what it comes down to. But God, who created us in his image and in his likeness, and so we are part of God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. And so in all of that, we have this amazing, amazing opportunity to connect with all the colors that God chose to create in this world.
Absolutely. And if you look at just even looking at nature, all the colors in nature. I mean, you have yellow daisies and red roses and, petunias and all the variety of colors in the universe. And we can appreciate each and every flower or every tree or a rainbow for its colors. And it doesn't minimize the beauty of a rose, doesn't minimize the beauty of a lily.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, they may
And a
not be
rose is not trying to be a lily.
There you go.
Lily's not trying to be a rose, right? So understanding that when you say, I don't see color, you're actually saying to a person that you don't see me and you're not acknowledging my heritage and you're not acknowledging my experience.
Absolutely.
So we'll be right back with Colorism Conversations.
Are you a deeply melanated woman who feels invisible, not beautiful, not valued, like you won't find love? Are you ready to affirm yourself by hearing your own words repeated? Writing and speaking our truth is liberating and empowering. Join Dr. Karen Moore for From Pain to Rose, No Longer Invisible. In this workshop, you will learn how to identify, understand, prepare, build, practice, and implement a strategy for loving your beautiful, deeply melanated skin. It's a self-love journey through creative writing and the spoken word.
For more information, go to thecolorofbeautiful.black. .black is the new .com. We're having a conversation with African American filmmakers. Join the African American Women in Cinema Filmmaker Series at the Clubhouse, presented by I Am the Color of Beautiful Global, every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. AAWIC on Clubhouse. Join us on the Clubhouse app for this inspiring conversation. Hosted by Karen Moore, founder of I Am the Color of Beautiful Global. Join us this Monday at 6 p.m. on the Clubhouse app for African American Women in Cinema's Filmmaker Series. Welcome back. We are back with Colorism Conversations and my co-host Renee Moore, who is the public health advisor for I Am the Color of Beautiful Global. And we are talking today about when people say the phrase, I don't see color. So now we're going to move into the second part of that, which is you don't hear me. When you say I don't see color, people on the receiving end of that may feel like you don't hear me. So it's kind of like that. One author described it as that nuke button in discussions, about inequality and injustice. And in order to eliminate someone's unease, we say, people will say, I don't see color, but you're basically saying that you are silencing our voice and you're not hearing me as a person of color. So, so what do you think about that?
So it's not about being treated fairly. It's about being treated equitably with equality. And so when you say you don't hear me, you're basically denigrating the whole fact that as a culture, people of color have not been treated equally. They have not been treated justly. And you don't hear that sometimes you need to understand your privilege. Because when you have privilege, you don't recognize it a lot of the time. So you need to understand that some of the opportunities that when I'm saying to you, some of the opportunities that you've had, I haven't had because of the color of my skin, because of maybe the neighborhood that I was forced to live in, because the job that my parents were forced to take, because of the school that wouldn't accept me. because of the color of my skin, because of the spaces that are not necessarily open to me. And that's not to say, and so what you're doing then is you're putting the burden on me. You're saying, oh, this is the land of the free, the home of the brave. We don't see color. And you're putting all of the responsibility on me, not to be where you have easily got. And you're denying some of the things and the struggles that I've had to go through to get to where I am.
Right. And it comes also to the idea of the disparities that we're facing in a wide range of systems, the criminal justice system, the hiring system, the housing system, like you said. And so these may be the experiences of the people that you're coming in contact with. And people want to be heard. We want to be heard, and we want to be acknowledged for our experiences. And when we talk about our experiences, and for someone to say, well, I don't see color, so that's irrelevant to anything that I'm talking about or anything that I'm doing, you are essentially shutting down what that person is saying and what that person is revealing about their particular experience in the world. So you just aren't hearing, you're choosing to shut that down, shut that out, and want to move on to something else instead of listening to what I'm telling you has been the experience of myself or the experience of my people, and understand where we're coming from, and seek to help make change with it.
Absolutely. And to not do that is only perpetuating the problem.
Right.
When you're saying, I don't see the opportunities that you haven't had. And that's not to make an excuse for me, but there are certain things that are facts.
Right.
So it's, you're going to say, oh, well, pull yourself up by the bootstrap. Well, that's not always as easily said as done, because maybe I don't have the opportunity or the access to mentors, or I don't have the opportunity or access for somebody to walk me in the boardroom. And it was very interesting because I was watching a TED Talk by Melody, financial lady, I cannot remember her last name.
Melanie Hobson.
Thank you. And she said, if you take somebody into a room full of Black CEOs, they would think that was odd. So how come we don't think it's odd when you take somebody into a room and it's all white CEOs?
Wow. Right.
Okay, but that just, and she was talking about the corporate makeup, and this was back in 2014, she was talking about how small a percentage of diversity there is in the higher level corporation, in the boardrooms. So in all truthfulness, who are you going to bring in that boardroom behind you?
Right.
That gives you an opportunity that I don't have, because you know somebody in that boardroom.
Right.
I've got to go through a whole lot of steps to make myself known to them.
Right. Right. And we have to also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then feel comfortable in that space and be accepted in that space and be able to be heard in that space.
Right. Right. And and for people who are not people of color to listen and really fully try to understand, like you said, what it is our experience has been, because though you may not look at people of color that way, so many of your constituents do. And you have to understand, you need to try to understand, as a person who has chosen to not see color, that when you're telling me that and you're not hearing about what my experience has been, you feel, many times I think we as people of color feel that, okay, so you're not like that, so you don't validate what I'm saying because that's not how you are. But you have to listen again. When we're talking about you don't hear me, you have to listen to what I'm telling you my experience has been. And though you may not treat people differently, you have to understand that other people have treated us differently.
And then also, in not hearing me, you're robbing yourself of an opportunity to possibly learn something
Right.
from me that may help you. And it was just so interesting. I often think about that Eddie Murphy movie, Trading Places.
Mm.
Okay, now he wasn't the type of person that you would think would do well in that space, but his life experience
Right.
is something that he could take to this
Right.
company, given an opportunity that he would not normally have been given had it not been that these two people were just playing games. He was
Right.
given an opportunity, and it wasn't about what college he went to. It wasn't about, it was just knowledge that he had from his everyday life
Right.
that enabled him to be able to put that in practice.
Right.
Without knowing certain cultural things about people, and without knowing certain ethnic things about people, you're robbing yourself of an amazing opportunity
Yes.
to learn so much about others and possibly even help you
Right.
attain what it is you're trying to achieve.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are back here with Colorism Conversations, talking with our public health advisor, Renee Moore, and we're talking about I don't see color. When people say, I don't see color. So now we're going to talk about the fact that that can mean you don't understand me. So we were talking about this before we went on break, and the idea that when you say that, you feel that the person has no desire to understand where I'm coming from and what my life experience is. So we were kind of talking about that before we went to break, and one of the things that I think is very important when we're having these conversations, in particularly when we're having them in regard to looking at colorism, that you don't understand me because let's face it, we all have, and we talked about this too in the very beginning, we all navigate through life differently. And we navigate through life based on how we look, whether it's skin tone. We're going to have a conversation about hair. And so when people first look at you and you say to me, I don't see color, so then you are not understanding about my life experience and what my life is like navigating through this country as not only a Black woman, but a deeply melanated Black woman. Because there are so many levels to our existence. And the levels of my existence, I am a Black woman. I'm a deeply melanated Black woman. I'm a wife. I am a sister. I am an entrepreneur. I am a musician. I am a songwriter. There are so many different levels to who I am as a woman. And to negate the fact that I'm deeply melanated, to tell me you don't see color, so that means that you don't understand exactly how I have to navigate this life as a Black woman and as a deeply melanated Black woman.
It's true. And it also opens you up to stereotypes that, you don't understand the stereotypes that have been placed on me. So one of the typical stereotypes is that deeply melanated Black women are angry,
Right,
they're loud.
right,
So there's pressure on you when you feel like you're not being heard, when you're not being seen, when you're not being understood. If you want to make that known, you have to take into consideration you don't want to be loud, you don't want to be angry. So now the pressure is all on you to not meet those stereotypes. But a white woman doesn't have that pressure.
no, and we're going to do a show. We're going to do a show. We've talked before about the angry Black woman. And one of the things that I constantly say that people have to realize, and when I talk about you don't understand me, you don't understand what I have to deal with when I am placed in a position where I have to address a situation and the levels of compression that I have to go through to not come across as the angry Black woman. Because then when I come across, because already, like you say, many times you look at a deeply melanated woman and you've already decided who I am, that I'm angry and that I'm loud and I'm all the rest of this. So when I have to address a situation in which I am upset, I have this whole level of compression I have to go through in order to address it and to know that I'm being heard, because I know that in so many people's minds, oh, here's just another, angry Black woman. And when they talk about here's another angry Black woman, usually she looks something like me. Okay, so when I've got to address this situation now, I have to go through, okay. And I gave the example. My husband had a kidney transplant and he was having some issues. He wasn't eating and he was having issues with his stomach. So I'm trying to get him a gastroenterology appointment. Very difficult getting him a gastroenterology appointment. Now, he had just been released from the emergency room with this issue of his stomach and he's not eating and all this other stuff going on. So they release him from the hospital and says, follow up with gastroenterology within the next 10 days. So I'm trying to get a gastroenterology appointment for him. So this was in September. The girl wants to tell me the first available appointment is in November. Well, that's not going to work. So I said to her, he was just released from the hospital, and the instructions on the discharge paper are that he's supposed to see a gastroenterologist. So she's like, well, the best that I can do is some date 6 weeks out still at the end of October. So I said, okay, fine. I took the appointment. So now I've got to go back to the transplant team, and I'm going through all this other stuff to get him an appointment. So finally I said to one of the transplant team members, I said, listen, he's not eating and he's miserable, okay? And so I need somebody to see him. So they decided to change his medication because he wasn't eating or whatever and some stomach issue. Okay. So they finally decided to change his medication and they set him up with a telehealth appointment. Okay. So in the meantime, okay, I'm trying to be proactive and at the same time remain calm. So he has to be taken to the emergency room. You know this. You and I had to get him out of the house, take him down, 30-minute ride down to where he was being treated. We're in the emergency room. They've done some blood tests. The doctor comes in and she says, your blood count is 5. It should be 12. That means you're bleeding somewhere. So, okay. So now all this stuff is going through my mind. Here's my compression thing that's at. I'm about to flip out. Okay. So I cannot flip out because number one, I don't want to upset my husband. So the compression starts. I don't want them calling the police on me. Compression again. I do not want to be kicked out of the hospital because then my husband will be upset and I need to be in here and know what they're doing. So that's another compression. Okay. If I start yelling and screaming in here, then it's going to upset other people and there's going to be a whole issue in all of this. So this is all the compression steps that I had to go through. Now, if I had been of another race, it would have been okay for me to flip out. But it would not have been okay for me as a deeply melanated Black woman up in this hospital emergency room to flip out right then and there. And they found out he had a bleeding ulcer and had to have blood transfusions and all this. Mind you, do not mistake the fact that, I did address it. I did not address it at that time. I had to wait until I did some more compression. But I did address the fact that he could not get a gastroenterology appointment and he ended up with a bleeding ulcer and blood transfusions. So, there's all this compression that has to go through that people, if you listen, you don't understand my life and what I have to go through. And for you to tell me you don't see color, so that means that you don't see the fact that I have to go through all this compression. I have to decompress on all these different levels to address the situation when I'm upset.
And that's true. And, and it goes on the other side too. It's not nearly as bad. But for me as a light-skinned person, I have to be very careful how I enter a room because I don't want to be seen as snobby and thinking I'm better than everybody else and all the other stereotypes that go along with being light-skinned. So I am not by nature a gregarious extrovert. But sometimes I have to put myself in that position, which is uncomfortable for me. And depending upon the day, it can be extremely stressful. But I'm mindful of the fact that I can't enter a room just feeling like, you know what, I just want to be left alone. I don't want to talk to anybody. It's just not the way I am. But certain spaces I have to enter, forcing myself to do things that make me uncomfortable. Talking myself up in the car. Okay, Renee, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, because you don't want to be seen as that person. So, it's not nearly as bad as you're having to decompress, but it's still stress. It's stressful. It's stress that's unnecessary because the stereotypes and, people thinking that, my life is so much better than it is. People in my own race thinking that my life is much better than it is. Because if I have one more person tell me that, my light skin offers me so much more privilege, but at the end of the day, I'm still Black.
So you don't really feel that you have certain privilege because your skin is lighter?
To be honest with you, I can't ever say that I've noticed it. So it may be something that hasn't been noticed. I do feel that within my own race, I feel that sometimes I get that stereotype assigned to me unfairly. Because I'm automatically seen as, so if I've experienced it, I haven't noticed it. I haven't, but that's part of privilege. Privilege is something that you're so used to happening that you don't even know that you haven't. So I can't ever say that I'm the one that got the job over somebody else, or I'm the one that, got certain opportunity. I haven't been cognizantly made aware of it.
Okay.
But then there is that pressure too of people assuming that I have that privilege.
Right.
And it doesn't always work out for me, because at the end of the day, I might be more acceptable, but I've been followed around stores. I've been called the N-word.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. That's interesting. Thank you for that honesty, though, about, maybe you had privilege that you didn't really recognize, and that's part of what privilege is.
Yeah.
So, that's really interesting that you recognize it that way, and that you're able to kind of, I don't want to say admit, but you recognize that it could be something that took place in your life that you weren't really aware of.
Right.
Yeah. All right, that's awesome. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. We are back again with more of Colorism Conversations and our discussion on I Don't See Color. So, what I want to do in this part of our discussion is I want to read something that I thought was very interesting in regard to I Don't See Color. So, this was from Larry Ferlazzo, who wrote in edweek.org, saying, I don't see color denies the racial identity of students. He was talking about teachers and students. So he says, imagine you are seated at a restaurant table with friends, preparing to enjoy an evening meal. A waitress arrives, eager to take drink orders and assess the table's familiarity with the food menu. After reading through the day's specials and taking notes on beverage preferences, she turns towards the kitchen. Wait, you interrupt. You did not ask whether or not any of us have allergies. I'm allergic to nuts. Could you please make note of this for the chef? Oh, the waitress responds. I don't see allergies. For years, humans existed on this earth without attention to these whimsical reactions to substances, and it has become a mental crutch for us. We feed everyone the same here, and allergies really are not a thing you need to worry about in this space. Then she walks away. Now, if this was a real interaction, everyone would find the scene and the waitress's response completely absurd. Why? Because the majority of the population believes in attention to and consideration for human allergies. Because we have scientific evidence of the sometimes dangerous physical and psychological experience of an allergic reaction. because it would have cost the waitress nothing to simply acknowledge and make note of the allergy and continue with service. Because it is her and the restaurant's job to provide the best and safest possible service to its customers. All of the above. Teachers who say they don't see race fall into the same absurd trap as a waitress who does not acknowledge the allergy of a patron. This phrase almost exclusively slips out of the mouths of our white colleagues who believe that by not seeing race, they take on a colorblind lens, which allows them to treat students fairly and provide the same experience for all. Fairness, however, is not the job of the educator. We ought to pursue equity in our experiences with students. I thought that was such an interesting analogy about with the waitress and about the whole idea that we do see color, and that as much as we may try to say that we don't, and we want to try to treat everyone the same, we're not all the same. And we
No,
have to understand that we are not all the same.
right. And that's the beauty of the world,
Yes.
that we're not all the same. It'd be a very boring world if we were just all, Stepford wives and Stepford husbands, we're just clones of
Right.
each other. So that's the beauty of it. And especially in students, that's the place where they're learning. They're there to learn.
Right.
So it's so important to be able to learn from someone else's culture and to learn from someone else's lived experiences and to be open to understanding and hearing and seeing what their lives are really like. Not what we see on TV, not what we
Right.
read about in what history books choose to tell us, but to be able to, the opportunity to be able to actually have somebody there who's of a different race or ethnicity or color than you. It opens you up to so much more
Yeah.
opportunities, so much opportunity for knowledge, so much opportunity to learn, so much opportunity just for an experience that you may never have again.
Yes, an opportunity for conversation.
Yes.
Opportunity for conversation. And to be able to, like you say, not fall into the trap of believing something about a person by what you see on television, but opening up a conversation and finding out exactly how they live, and to understand that we all have our own individual experiences in life, and that not every deeply melanated woman has the same experience. Not every light-skinned woman has the same experience. Not every black woman has the same experience. Not every Indian woman has the same experience. Not every white woman has the same experience. And we have to be willing to have conversations with one another to go deeper and to find out what your particular experience is. And so that every time that I come in contact with someone who is of a different culture, I'm not going to assume that when I talk to someone else who told me about their experience, that this person's experience is exactly the same because they're of the same culture. Because we
Absolutely.
come from different places. Even as a culture, we come from different places. My experience as a deeply melanated black woman is not going to be the same experience as um, if Oprah Winfrey had a child. Do you know what I'm saying? Her
Right.
child growing up with a billionaire parent, her experience is going to be different than mine.
Absolutely.
So we've got to understand that we're all coming from these different experiences and have conversations and find out what people's lives are like and what they've been like, and acknowledge the things that they've come through and find out more. And even where they might be in this particular situation, what they're dealing with, find out, if there's something that you can do to help.
Absolutely. And once again, it just makes your life so much richer. I was fortunate to be in the military, and I have friends from all over the world. And I've tasted foods that I would never have tasted. I've seen, cultures in intimate ways that I would never have been able to experience. And it's just such an enriching experience. And it doesn't mean that I agree with everything that they do, but I understand. And that makes me more appreciative of what makes them who they are.
Absolutely.
Because you can't separate a person's culture from who they are.
Right.
And culture,
Right.
like you said, culture varies from place to place.
It does.
You're in Philadelphia. There's the culture generally of the African American. Then there's the
Right.
culture of the family. Then there's the culture of the community. So the culture in Germantown, part of Philadelphia, is completely different
Yes.
than the culture in North Philadelphia, which is completely different than the culture in South Philadelphia.
Right.
So there's so much to be learned and appreciated
Yes.
by appreciating all the colors that God has made us.
Yes. Yes. And so as we start to wrap this up, we want you as the audience to really think about whether you've actually said, I don't see color. And what did you mean? And for us to find an alternate way of expressing the fact that we treat each other equally, or that we treat each other with civility, we treat each other according to how we want to be treated. And so, but saying I don't see color is not the way to get that across.
No,
It's not the way to get that across. To say I see you as an equal, or I see you as a beautiful woman, and I want to know more about you and about the experience that you have in life. Let's leave the I don't see color. Let's leave that alone.
Or I just see you for who you are.
Exactly.
You know, and all that involves.
Right. Right.
You know.
Yes.
And stop using it as a tool to make yourself feel more comfortable.
Right. Because it's not about comfort.
No.
It's about change.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to be uncomfortably uncomfortable.
Yes.
To make the change.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. So on that note, listen, sometimes you have to be uncomfortably, what was it? Uncomfortably uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So on that note, we are going to wrap up. We thank you so much for joining us. And you know how we do. We say it loud. We wear it proud. I am the color of beautiful. Be blessed.
We say it loud, we wear it proud. I am the color of beautiful.